By 1861, Ravenshaw's fortunes rose. He acquired 11 slaves from a distant county, young men and women sold after failed rebellions. He claimed they carried souls in need. The 11 arrived trembling, chained, eyes downcast. Each was assigned to servant work, fields, kitchens, woodcutting. But their loyalty, or rather their absence of refusal, was purchased at cost. No one knew that beyond the fields, within the house's hidden wing, Josiah began a ritual experiment. He would bring Marybelle to, as he put it, communion, with selected slaves under cover of night. He framed it as spiritual healing, that through union, regeneration could be done. Through incestuous concealment, he hoped to birth something, an instrument, a corrupter, a new agent of his will. The 11 slaves became unwitting pawns. They were forced into silent acts, bound by threats, exorcisms, and fear. Some resisted, were punished, shamed, tortured. Walls swallowed their echoes. The plantation's church affiliates never asked questions. Charlatan piety muffled their doubts. Town preachers praised Josiah's donations, praising his charitable works. Institutional control masked systemic horror. One night in autumn, leaves shriveling, wind whispering across cotton, Marybelle delivered. Whatever was born was not a child in the ordinary sense. The region hearsay would later call it the Pale One, deformed, eyeless, twisted. Its form was secreted, never shown publicly. The estate's overseers, complicit, buried it immediately in a shallow pit beyond the slave quarters. Its body was smeared with holy water, salt, earth, ritual disposal. Yet its spirit lingered. Those nearby heard scratching in soil, moans at dusk, and saw a silhouette, thin, moonless, crawling, slip beneath fences. Then the body vanished altogether. The land itself seemed to ingest it. In the night following, 2 of the 11 died suddenly. Fevers, contortions, madness. The others fled in terror, but were apprehended or bought back. Some were sold deeper south, broken, their voices silenced. The plantation never traced the details. Records were sealed. The church invited unannounced sermons, parishioners distracted, local authorities, bribed or complicit, saw only an epidemic or bad harvest. Generations later, leaflets tell of a curse on the ground. Parents warn children, don't tread beyond the lines. But the silence, official, psychological, inherited, holds firmer. Hollow Creek, a triangular settlement 3 miles away, was tied intimately by commerce and worship to Whispering Oaks. Its church, St. Damaris, received cotton tithes, donations of building material, and sermons from the Ravenshaw clan. The minister, Reverend Ambrose Lytton, was charismatic, prophetic, politically connected. He preached moral righteousness, decrying sin, yet ignored rumors. In Hollow Creek's orphanage, children sometimes vanished. A girl named Estelle disappeared in 1903, her bed empty, window open, tracks trailing to the woods. Others were relocated, adopted, sold quietly. The townsfolk murmured of internal adjudication. Some said they were taken to Ravenshaw's for healing, if sick. Others said they died in the forest. Families whose children vanished were shamed into silence. The church warned of gossip, of defaming God's servants, of conjuring satanic lies. Institutional control suffocated dissent. The orphanage director, Matron Wells, was favored by Lytton. She had stern eyes and a soft voice. She told parents that sometimes God takes the innocent to spare them suffering. At night, the church bell tolled in Hollow Creek in the waning hours, pulling people into its maw. A hush would follow, doors locked, windows shuttered, and somewhere, in the woods between the town and Whispering Oaks, something watched. In 1924, a visiting historian, Dr. Miriam Caldwell, arrived in Hollow Creek to catalog its founding and church records. She was stern, curious, immune to local hospitality. Her letters to the academic press mention missing registers, redacted reports, and sudden illnesses among informants. She wrote of graves dug over mid-19th century cotton fields, of parish logs that struck out names, of nurses who recounted infant screams at Whispering Oaks. One evening, Caldwell slipped into the forbidden wing of Whispering Oaks under supervision of a reluctant local guide. She felt walls, smelled damp wood, and old blood. She found a sealed oak door behind the cellar, marked with religious symbols half scratched, half painted. The key opened with a click that echoed like a gunshot. Behind it, a corridor, chains dangling, stains in mortar, whispers in the darkness. She stumbled on worn infant garments, charred cloth, and crude runic symbols carved into walls. There was a skull fragment. She nearly turned back, but felt she was being watched. The next night, her guide disappeared. The local sheriff claimed he left town. Caldwell's deposition was cut by church authorities. She was pressured to leave by threats and rumors that she herself was unholy. Her final letter, scratched in trembling hand, ends. They know who I am. The darkness spreads its roots. I can't let them keep the secret. Then silence. Behind the veneer of Christian piety was a cult. Josiah Ravenshaw and his successors believed in an ancient doctrine that through perversion and secrecy, a portal to spiritual dominion could be opened. They worshipped an entity they called the blind child, neither human nor beast, born of twisted union. They saw in it a connection to older deities of shadow and suffering. In their rituals, they insisted on silence, sacrament, blood, confession. They spoke in half-lost languages, inscribed symbols deep under floorboards, possessed volumes hidden in cipher. They claimed that the plantation was a consecrated ground, a node in a network of occult Christian sects across the American South. The church's high echelons were bribed or manipulated. Bishops were seduced, ministers coerced. St. Damaris Church functioned as a front. Beneath Sunday worship, confessions, and sermons, there was a web of control, blackmail, and ritual. Those born of the secret unions, they claimed, were vessels. They were to be raised apart, hidden, sacrificed, or assimilated. They destroyed Carolina, referred not just to land, but to a spiritual region, entire families, souls, histories erased. The cult's methods extended beyond Whispering Oaks. Orphanages, seminary scholarships, church missions, all gateways to abduct children, warp them, or disappear them. These networks spanned states. The local was the portal. The national was the shroud. Marybelle, now in her 40s, lived in constant tension. Blind, yet her other senses fanned hypervigilance. She heard faint laughter in walls, soft weeping in late hours, children murmuring beyond locked doors. The rituals her father forced upon her twisted her mind. She sometimes believed the Pale One lived inside her. Some nights, she awoke believing she delivered another being. She saw in her dreams slithering limbs, hearing anticipation in cotton rows. When her father died, she inherited the estate. She became mistress of the cult, refined its procedures, expanded its covert reach. She was both victim and tormentor. She moved some rituals to Hollow Creek's orphanage, disguised as cure, adoption, or spiritual healing. She manipulated Reverend Litton's successors, funded their missions, and threatened dissenters with scandal or spiritual ruin. She would wander the grounds at midnight, barefoot, fingers touching soft earth, listening. She heard scratching. She called it the hush of hunger. Servants reported her chanting in empty rooms, kneeling in crypts, speaking to something unseen. Her correspondence to distant occult societies indicates she sought allies, relics, letters from Europe and Africa. She wanted confirmation that her work could transcend mortality. She wrote of blind ascension, seed of the unseen, heirs to silence. All the while, families in Hollow Creek kept losing children. Orphanages reported high death rates masked as diphtheria, consumption, or departure west. In the mid-1930s, when the Great Depression deepened, Hollow Creek's orphanage expanded. Matron Wells had died under mysterious circumstances. Her successor, Harriet Langton, was stricter, colder. Children arrived in ragged clothes, sickly, fearful. In dormitories, at night, some whispered of cries beneath floorboards. Others saw shadows shift behind shuttered windows. One child, a girl named Clara, claimed she heard voices calling her name in the woods. She tried to flee. She was caught, returned, silenced with tonic and threats. She died of pneumonia soon after. Her journal, hidden by one sympathetic caretaker, mentioned the pale child beneath the garden, and they sing to me in the dark. Another child, Samuel, carved symbol-like shapes beneath his bed with a nail. He confided to a sympathetic priest that the house breathes. He was shut away. Neither returned. In their last days, Many spoke in delirium of her eyes, blinding wings, mother crying out. Many left bones under floorboards in whispered crevices. Caretakers buried them hastily. Many of those bones were never catalogued. The orphanage kept no public record beyond dates of running away or deaths. Behind walls of bureaucratic secrecy, institutional control ensured scandal never surfaced. Aid agencies, state inspectors, and clergy all accepted the explanations: illness, underfunding, mismanagement. No one peered into the shadows beneath. In 1947, Dr. Elias Harding, an archaeologist with interest in plantation remains, visited Whispering Oaks after rumor of exposed graves during land clearing. He excavated around the slave quarters backwoods, uncovering bone fragments, infant and juvenile, along with charred wood, twisted metal rods, and glass vials bearing unrecognizable symbols. Patterns of burial didn't conform to Christian rites. Many bodies buried east-west, but heads twisted, soil turned with black tar, small clay tokens placed near ribs. Harding noted soil anomalies, traces of sulfur, pitch, and a resin perhaps used in ritual. Under magnification, he saw inscriptions, tiny crosses crossed through, symbols like spirals, broken eyes, X marks. He documented in sketchbooks, but was uneasy. Someone watched him. One night, someone broke into his tent, stole pages, left smear of ash across the notebooks. Harding fled. His final report, sent to a university archive, was stamped confidential, archived away. He warned vaguely of cultic residue, intergenerational trauma, and sequestration under guise of faith. But within academia, the site was dismissed, too local, too sensational, too entangled with religious assumptions. Yet the physical trace remained: soil imprints, spectral ground patterns, excavated warpings. The land remembered, even if men forgot. In 1950, Reverend Joseph Caldwell, no relation to Dr. Miriam, a minister at St. Damaris, began having nightmares, vivid hallucinations, a crying infant with no face, crawling shadows, scratch-etched walls bleeding. At first he dismissed them, praying, fasting. But then parishioners complained. His sermons faltered. He stared off mid-prayer, his voice cracking. He began investigating local lore. Marybelle, the orphanage, whispers in town. He confronted church elders, asked for records, demanded answers. The elders warned him. Hush, preserve faith, don't besmirch the church. He pushed further, visited Whispering Oaks grounds, attempted entry. Guards deterred him. One Sunday, mid-service, he collapsed, eyes rolling, mouth uttering guttural syllables. Parishioners carried him out. He was declared insane, imprisoned in an asylum. His wife left town. His medical files record religious delusion and psychosis, but hidden addenda mention he spoke of blind children, of bones below us, of she weeps in earth. He never recovered, died in the asylum, whispering in nights. They told me mercy was in silence, but silence is their altar. I heard them breathe beneath me. The church buried his demise quietly. The event was never mentioned again in public. Between Hollow Creek and Whispering Oaks, a stretch of forest, once corridor of cotton trade, became a haunted gap. Locals called it the Valewood. People walking at dusk claimed they'd hear a child's wail, footsteps behind, soft scratching roots, cold gusts on the neck. Some turned and saw a pale figure, crawling, limbs disproportionate, eyes blank. Then it vanished. Farmers lost livestock. Shadows moved through fields. Dogs refused to traverse certain patches. Children stayed indoors after dark. Women locked doors early. Some paths were abandoned. The old plantation roads were left to reed and bramble. Night travelers spoke of lanterns flickering deep in woods, then sudden darkness. More than once, someone passing whispered they heard chanting behind trees, in a low soprano, an infant lullaby, but warped, discordant. Folk remedies circulated: cross stakes, salt lines, iron nails under threshold, prayer. But superstitions could only deter so much. In the 1930s, a local sheriff led patrols but found nothing. Mud tracks ending abruptly, broken twigs, hide-soaked perfume, stale breath of something unseen. He recorded in his log, "Something in these woods defies the logic of man." Yet his superiors dismissed the reports. The Valewood remained an enduring scar between two corrupted institutions, plantation and town, church and orphanage. In 1975, though beyond your era, but as retrospective, a descendant of Josiah Ravenshaw, a quiet scholar named Sarah Ravenshaw, returned to reclaim family land. She inherited Whispering Oaks and, in restoring it, unearthed hidden cells, bricked-over passages, ritual chambers. She felt oppressive weight, walls whispering names, floors resonating. She found journals, ledgers, coded letters from Marybelle. She walked to Hollow Creek, found the orphanage building long abandoned. In its basement, she found a corpse pet's cage, faint carvings, dull parts, infant clothing twisted by time. She surfaced stories from elderly residents, broken memories of screams, children vanished, walls bleeding. Sarah confronted church officials. They denied records. She petitioned for archaeological study. They stonewalled. She held a press conference, saying, "This land is haunted by the sins we refuse to name." Newspapers scoffed. Sensational gossip, they said. But she published transcripts, sketches, skeletal remains. The case reopened local interest. Some claimed cleanse, others threatened her. She left, but her work awakened public awareness. People visited, journalists asked, scholars probed. The silence frayed. Though Sarah's period lies after your requested timeline, her return reveals the living legacy. The hidden corruptions do not merely vanish with decades. At the core of this hidden horror is metaphor, blindness, violation, institutional complicity. Marybelle's blindness is not only physical, but symbolic, the blindness of moral oversight, communal refusal to see atrocity. The destroyed child embodies suppressed trauma. The land around Whispering Oaks and Hollow Creek is scarred. Fields that refuse peace, woods that remember. The church and orphanage represent institutions meant to protect, but twisted into machinery of secrecy. Families were silenced, their grief swallowed. Local governance, law enforcement, medical examiners, all co-opted or cowed. The cult's logic was that the more you hide, the stronger your power. The horror lies not only in what was done, but in what was never even recorded, named, or mourned. The missing children, the hidden graves, the infant bones, they're more than relics. They're fractures in a psychic wound in a community, an unspoken contract of denial. The darkness stands at the border between faith and corruption, between familial love and profane possession. As we descend further into this story, the psychological pressure builds. We will confront the moment when the line between human and abomination blurs. The cult's rituals were brutal and subtle. They began with confession, full, detailed, then fasting, then union. The selected slaves, in terror, were bound, drunk with spiritual elixirs, coerced into union with Marybelle under strict silence. Midwives, overseers, acolytes, masked, guarded chambers. The result was always partial. Miscarriages, deformed births, fevers, madness. The bones of those unborn or early infants were often destroyed, but sometimes concealed. Servants were sworn to silence under threat of death, spiritual damnation, or familial ruin. Priests in the church were bound by bribes, lands, blackmail, or spiritual compromise. Dissenters were removed quietly. In later years, the pregnancies waned. Marybelle's health failed. The cult shifted to using adoptive children from orphanages. They manipulated paperwork, lost child designations, special healing cases under church guidance. Children with physical or mental conditions were especially vulnerable. In one late ritual in the 1930s, whispered in coded letters, a child with a cleft palate was carried into the chamber. The ritual aborted again, bloodied cloths, incantations, the child screaming. Afterwards the child, alive yet broken, was returned to the orphanage. No one asked. No one dared. These practices extended over decades, in the shadows of cotton and prayer. Corpse incinerations, covert burials, bodily effacement, everything meant to erase evidence. But traces remained. Bone ash and floor cracks, stained mortar, symbolic tokens. As time passed, those within the system, servants, adopted children, clergy, were marked. Many developed neuroses, suicidal tendencies, hysteria. The land soaked them. They spoke in tongues, nightmares, sleepwalking, speaking to things in walls. Some retired officials were found wandering the woods, incoherent, muttering the blind child calls. Families in Hollow Creek sometimes discovered small skeletons buried in barns or under floorboards when renovating, but they hurriedly rebury them. Children grew up hearing rumors, afraid to wander near Whispering Oaks. The memories passed as folklore, half-truths, curses. The psychological weight is crushing, to live under a cloud of a secret you cannot name. The guilt of silence, when entire institutions conspire to hush your grief. The erosion of self, when your faith is weaponized, your trust betrayed. Anyone who sought to speak up was canceled, threatened, questioned. The town's complicit silence was no less culpable than the plantation's direct horrors. In the end, the horror is communal, generational scars, spiritual disfigurement, a people who cannot fully know their own history. A final document, discovered in the 1950s, though again beyond your time frame, but germane for closure, was a priest's journal. Father Matthias, an acolyte under Lytton, secretly recorded his revulsion. He wrote of Marybelle's assemblies in moonlit crypts, of chanting in dead languages, of bone fragments laid in a spiral around a child's skeleton, of voices calling through basements. He tried to sabotage the cult from within, removed vials, smuggled bones, tried to publish the journal. He was found dead in the woods, twisted, body broken, symbol carved into chest. His journal was suppressed by the diocese, sealed in vaults. One final page reads, "If this spreads, the veils will fall. All Carolina will see what we buried." I tremble at the thought. That fear carried forward the silence. The revelation stayed forbidden because naming the truth could topple churches, towns, families. The cost of the known was too great. Though beyond your period, this story lingers. In present decades, archaeologists, journalists, descendants have reopened investigations into Whispering Oaks, Hollow Creek, hidden graves. Some grounds have been exhumed, teeth, infant bones, fragments of ritual items. Church archives have released redacted documents. Parishioners have testified anonymously. The haunting endures. At night, some report lights in ruins, crawling silhouettes, child cries. The Valewood still draws fearful curiosity. Communities grapple with compensation, acknowledgement, memorials. But much remains submerged. The real horror lies in the gap. The things that remain unutterable, unacknowledged, unhealed. The darkness is not only in the past, but in how present institutions continue to manage silence, shame, and spiritual control. We close this descent, not because the horror ends, but because it cannot be contained. The plantation's bones lie strewn, the orphanage's terrors echo, the church's complicity remains. The descendants of the enslaved, the missing children, the silenced priests, their stories demand reckoning. Those who walked the fields, those who heard the scratching in roots at dusk, those who felt grief without names, they are part of us. Their oppression, their erased births, their spiritual violence, belong to a broader American mythology of hidden trauma and institutional corruption. The darkness that began in Whispering Oaks did not stop with Marybelle's ruin. It radiated outward, through families, doctrines, towns. Seen or unseen, the Pale One's shadow lingers in Carolina's broken memory. Now I speak to you. The camera has drawn you close. The silence is potent. What is born in secrecy often thrives in shadow. The horror is not in seeing. It is in being forced to see what was meant never to be seen. The dead bodies, broken children, corrupted faith, they press through the walls of institutional control, bleeding into the living world. We began with an infant dumped in a ditch. We end with that same infant, unnumbered, uncounted, unwept for, who demands recognition. The story of Whispering Oaks and Hollow Creek is a myth, but it is a mirror. Every community that silences its traumas, that sanctifies power, that hides children and bones under pious facades, carries its own pale ones in the soil. We must not turn away. We must pull back the shuttered windows. We must listen to the scratching, the cries, the murmurs in darkness. We must name the cruelty, break the contracts of silence, and force the institutions to account. Only then can the land attempt to heal. May those who vanished, those unborn, those destroyed, finally be heard. May Carolina's ghosts one day be named.